Welcome to another episode of Stay Paid. I'm Joshua Stike. You, sir.
My name's Luke Akery.
Are Luke Akery. Good job. You got that one right.
Luke Akery.
Luke Akery.
We actually had a fake Instagram account. There's a fake Instagram account out there of a guy named Lou who loves cake.
It was Luke's alter ego. Yeah. And the brilliant part about it is everything that Luke Akery said was opposite of what Luke Akery said. So instead of take action today, it was like,
be lazy.
Yeah, I forget the exact what. I forget it. You got to go to Luke Akery Instagram.
Yeah,
it's like do nothing if you want or something.
If you want.
We have kind of an interesting interview for this episode. This is really kind of cool. Someone different that we got a chance to speak to on this idea of financial certainty. So it's a CPA. Yep. He's a CPA. We're going to introduce him in a little bit.
Just to give you guys an idea, he's an expert in derivatives for hedge funding. I'm probably even saying it wrong.
I thought you were saying that to me like I was supposed to know what that meant.
Yeah, it's so over my head. But what I love about this interview, in all seriousness, is you can just go, this is someone who has really thought through the math equation of really business,
but it's
like finances and how do you actually algorithmically get yourself to financial certainty.
Yeah. And
it's a process.
For a bonus for everybody, at the end, he plays a little game with Luke.
Yeah, stick around.
Taps into Luke's childhood and deep into his soul. So you want to make sure you check that out. We're going to introduce him here after the break. But first, we would love it if you would head on over to Apple Podcast and subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and leave a review and a comment along to know, just to let us know how we're doing. It really helps out the show and kind of gives us some feedback in terms of, hey, what can we be doing better? As well, this week's featured review comes from Nick EG79. So this is Nick G, the mortgage newbie, rates the podcast 5 stars and says, I think everyone that's in sales or marketing wants to stay paid. That's okay.
Bingo.
I would like to do that also. I'm a new loan officer, and I've gained a lot of helpful tips since I started listening to Stay Paid this year. I recently listened to the cold calling episode. I remember this one now. I love this. And I just bought 300 leads to cold call today. Very good information. Thank you, Josh and Luke. The podcast is thebomb.com. So I think Nick might have went back to some old episodes to get that because that was a joke before.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I can't even remember.
You said something was thebomb.com. I'm like, that's not a saying. You're like, no, it's a saying.
It is a saying. Thebomb.com.
All right. Well, thank you, Nick, for leaving that podcast. If you want to leave a review, we would love to hear from you as well. And now on to this week's episode.
From ReminderMedia, this is Stay Paid, a sales and marketing podcast on a mission to help you close more deals and retain more business. Hosted by the VP of Marketing, Josh Stike, and ReminderMedia's president, Luke Akery. So get ready to hear the golden nuggets that will allow you to live a life of freedom tomorrow, but only if you take action today.
And today, our guest is Dan Nicholson. He is the founder of Nth Degree CPAs, a 3-time top 40 under 40 accountant globally, and has been featured on shows such as CBS Radio and Fox. Dan is far from your typical CPA, focusing on an unconventional way of looking at business growth through financial certainty, something I think we're all looking for, especially in these times. Any kind of certainty would be great, but financial certainty is pretty awesome. With tools like the CertaintyApp and new book, Seeking Certainty, Dan is helping business owners and entrepreneurs focus less on acquiring more and focus more on getting closer to the thing that they actually want. Dan, welcome to Stay Paid.
Super pumped to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Dan, excited to have you on the show. Talk about this subject, financial certainty. It's something I was just saying that we haven't really unpacked on this show. Like we tend to focus on generating sales, generating leads, which obviously can lead to more money, which can lead to certainty. But the whole concept. So I'm interested to get your take on it. But would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience. Like tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, what got you into entrepreneurship and led you up to today.
Yeah, the full disclosure, I'm someone who has a little bit of an identity crisis. I grew up as kind of the cliche kid scheming on business ideas and mostly bad ideas. Nothing too nefarious, but a lot of bad ideas. Went into college thinking, how do I prepare myself best to be an entrepreneur? And so I ended up getting an accounting degree and an information systems degree just because I thought, okay, technology and accounting, language of business, best combination. And then I went in the complete opposite direction, which is I ended up getting a fellowship at the board that writes all the accounting standards in the US.
Oh, wow.
Basically sort of like the Supreme Court of accounting, sort of would be the equivalent. And I can tell you, as you might expect, writing an accounting standard is truly the least entrepreneurial environment. Lots of arguments about Oxford commas and...
it sounds riveting. I mean, it just sounds so thrilling. But how common is that you go to school for something that you tend to not really shift? I went to school for computer science, and I'm now a leader of a sales and marketing organization. So naturally, I don't tie that together. But anyways, keep going.
Right. Yeah. So that put me in this whole weird opposite direction from entrepreneurship. The accounting standard, I will not bore you guys with the details, but the accounting standard I worked on was a derivatives and hedge accounting standard. So you heard about hedge funds, GameStop and all that stuff was in the news recently. And so became a so-called derivatives hedge accounting expert, and first person in my family to go to college. So I was sort of 23, 24, feeling pretty conflicted, honestly, about what am I supposed to be doing and what do I actually want to be doing, and dealing with some guilt about making more than my parents have ever made, and at the same point being like, I hate this. This is not fun. I feel like I'm in this like soul-sucking environment. So moved around a bunch, and then about 11 years ago, I realized that maybe I'm pretty good at this accounting thing, and there was an opportunity to do something different in the accounting space. And so I sort of gave myself permission to go like, okay, I can scratch my entrepreneurial itch and take advantage of skills that I sort of built up. And so the last 11 years has kind of been my journey into entrepreneurship and ultimately realizing what people want is financial certainty.
That's awesome. Before we jump into financial certainty, what was your worst business idea? You said you came up with a lot of business ideas. Do you remember the worst one?
Maybe not my worst one, but one that always comes to mind is working in corporate environments, especially early on, there was a lot of being thrown under the bus. You guys familiar with that term? Yeah. So I made this website where you could anonymously email someone that they threw you under the bus.
No way.
It was called busdodger.com, and it would, this was like 15 years ago. I have no idea how I was going to actually monetize it, but it's basically this.
That's fantastic.
Pre-canned email about that you could just send, and or you could kind of write your own customized email, but it would send like basically subject line like, hey, bus driver, you just threw me under the bus.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. I love it.
It's pretty good.
So let's talk about, get a little serious now, I guess, with financial certainty. What is it? Why is it important to people? Because it sounds like something anyone would obviously want, right? Certainty in your financial situation, but maybe explain like, what is that all about and why do people need it?
Yeah. Well, in the process of having thousands of sales calls, frankly, from the sales and marketing podcasts, in the process of having thousands, I probably had 3,000 sales calls over the last 11 years. People call up to an accounting firm and they say, hey, I want help with my taxes, which seems obvious, or I want help with my bookkeeping. And you start asking them why, getting into what are the reasons. And ultimately, what it came back to was people wanted more cash, and they wanted more cash. So they wanted to pay less in tax, so they'd have more cash. If they had more cash, the hope was that they'd be able to allocate that to something and get closer to the things that they actually wanted. So really, just helping someone tax planning or doing their books is a transaction unless I could connect it back to them funding their priorities.
Okay.
So that was sort of the starting point, just recognizing that I'm either going to be a commodity unless I can actually connect what I'm doing to something bigger, funding their priorities. And then I started to realize these kind of common trends, something called the highest month paradigm, for example, that business owners were finding themselves in. And even my startup client or my client with hundreds of millions, they all were worried about, am I going to run out of money? It's like more money, more problems. And ultimately, I boiled it down to this equation, and I adapted from someone else, which is financial anxiety equals financial uncertainty times financial powerlessness. And so so it's a multiplication. The uncertainty about your finances and the lack of power that you have over your finances amplifies this anxiety that you have. It's just like, okay, I got it. What I'm really trying to do is give people more power over their finances and drive down their uncertainty, frankly, so they just have less anxiety. If they have less anxiety, they can get closer to what they want.
So, I mean, obviously the $1 million question there is like, how do you do that? Like, how do you do that systematically for people?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question because you could call 10 people and get 10 different answers to a problem that seems obvious. Something like, should I grow my business or should I invest in sales and marketing? You could talk to 10 people and get 10 different answers. So there's some dynamic complexity in helping people solve their problems. So I build an operating system around financial certainty, and it starts with some core assumptions. So like any operating system, what are the core assumptions? I call them the 4 commandments of financial certainty. And then I built a set of principles that are sort of the algorithms carrying this operating system example through that help us process our issues. So I sort of developed this whole methodology around it.
Now, is this a worksheet that people do, or is it like an actual software program you've developed?
It is CertaintyApp is one of.
Okay, so it's actually an app. Okay.
Yeah, so it's an app that's part of it, but there's also some internal exercises that you have to do.
What can you lay out for us? Kind of like the 4 essentials.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so commandment number 1 is closer is greater than more. It's the idea that we think more is the answer to everything, but it's only the answer if it gets you closer to what you actually want. So sometimes more might be a problem, actually. If you want 10 more hours of time per week and you hire a bunch of direct reports, in the short term, you got further away from having that free time. So we have to understand what we want to get closer to. So closer is greater than more.
That's actually really good. Not to cut in there, but I was literally just having a convo with Steve, and
our CEO.
Yeah, and Steve, like I was telling him, because we were talking about the growth of ReminderMedia, we were dealing with some problems, and I said it really comes down to. I mean, Josh is smiling because we're always dealing with problems. I said it comes down to, what do we actually want? Because to be at the end and just be $1 billion company, like that doesn't mean anything if on the route to get there, we've messed up A and we've treated B wrong. And I mean, like we have damage in our mind all the way there. So it's so critical that's like more is not the answer. It's what are you trying to get close to? I just want the audience to know, like I really
like that principle.
Well, in practicality, it's so true because we literally, for our business, we're just having that convo today, and it's a guiding principle. Like you're saying, it's a commandment. It's like you've got to know that, because if you don't, you're gonna go down the wrong route and you're gonna do things you don't want to do and end up at the end of your life going, well, what did I actually get?
That's right. Yeah, it is that you end up in the cliche deathbed scenario where you look back in your life and you're like, I didn't do the things that I want.
Yep.
Your business, if you work for a big corporation, sorry, you don't have a say. Like you're just more is the answer to everything. You're maximizing shareholder value. But if you're a small business owner, your business, in my opinion, your business exists to serve you. And so the business truly should be getting you closer to the things that you want. Otherwise, what's the point? So you have to define what you want is sort of the outcome of that commandment. Because it informs the second one, which is we have to understand the difference between preference and binary. Preference-based decisions, binary decisions. So growing your business is a preference. Right? One person could want to grow their business, another might not want to grow their business. So you can't go Google it, right? Binary, fact or fiction, we could go Google it and get the answer. And so people chase their tail around questions because they're acting like it's a fact or fiction scenario when it's actually a preference. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if it's binary, if it's fact, then you go Google it, get the answer. So it comes back to, do we actually know what we want?
How does someone apply that? Like, I'm kind of understanding what you're saying, but like, how do you actually apply that to factor into the financial certainty, or where you're going with that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So that's part of the reason why I built the CertaintyApp, where we basically take your vision board, your kind of preferences and the things you want to get closer to, and we turn it into a solvable equation. Basically, we create what I call your unique wealth algorithm. So all the things that you want, all the preferences, whether that's 10 more hours per week, it's the Lamborghini, it's time with your kids, whatever it may be, there's a cost to those things. Having 10 more hours a week might mean outsourcing a bunch of work. It might be taking on less projects, right? So everything on our vision board can be turned into a cost. What does it cost, and when do I want to achieve it by? So if we take all those things and we put them down into a solvable equation, then we can see, kind of like Google Maps, how much do we have now? What are all our assets and cash flow now? And based off what we want, all the things on our vision board, are we making enough to fund and hit those dates? Gotcha. If not, how much more do we need to make? Once we know that, then we can act, then we're informed about, we can connect, hey, this strategy, investing in sales and marketing, that generated X amount more revenue, X amount more profit. Let's feed that back into the equation. How much closer did that get us to the things that we want?
Man, so this is like a super complex pros and cons list.
Yeah, seriously.
And then do this type of thing. Where to invest to get what you want.
The discipline you need to actually sit down and write out all your preferences, and then analyze, what is that preference actually going to cost me? I mean, that takes some time.
Does your app prompt questions, like to actually answer some of these preferences, or?
It has an onboarding process where we basically broke out people's wealth equation into two buckets, what I call core, and then preference. Core is basically financial security, pay off debt, fund reserves, fund retirement. So everybody has those, right? If you're an entrepreneur, you just call retirement having enough where I don't have to work. It doesn't mean I won't. And then preferences are the things that are unique to you. And so based off your age, gender, where you live, etc., the app will start making suggestions about things you might be missing. Hey, someone your age in this area typically has these other preferences. Do you want to act in that? So or you confirm, no, I'm good. So there's an onboarding process, and the app is evolving to help people kind of perfect it. But the thing is that people don't usually like to do this exercise if they're afraid of failure. Because when you define success, you also define what failure looks like. And so if you're unwilling to define success, that's probably because you're afraid of failing. You're afraid
that's really good.
No, that's awesome. So we got closer is better than more, preference versus binary. You've mentioned there's 4, right? So are there 2 more? Okay.
There's 2 more. Number 3 is every business decision is a financial decision. So a lot of folks who call me say, hey, I don't want to deal with the finance side of things. Can you just handle it? Well, sales is money in your account. Right. So spending money on marketing is money out of your account. We can't firewall them off and act like they're not connected. And then the last is that basically business is gambling. And so we need to make bets that are asymmetric, meaning bets where the upside is substantially greater than the downside.
Well, how do you go through that? Yeah. How do you go through that process?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is framing is that most business owners that I see, they're making bets where the downside is equal to the upside. So I spend $1, I'm going to make $2, or I'm going to lose the $1, or I'm going to make $100,000, or I'm going to be homeless. It's like that's the downside greater than the upside. If you study the great entrepreneurs, like look at Elon Musk, he's only making bets where the upside is substantially greater than the downside. So some people are just naturally gifted at doing that. I developed a process to try and manufacture it, to try and kind of rig it to evaluate ideas. I can walk you guys through that if you want.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So, so again, most of us are making bets where it's either a home run or a huge failure. And I have this idea of we want to rig the game to win. Like, let's just put ourselves in and that's the whole idea of derivatives and hedging is let's just make sure that we're okay with every possible outcome. The biggest thing that billionaires want is to make sure they're still going to be a billionaire. They don't want to go from being a billionaire to broke, right? So I call this the 4 lenses. This is one of my kind of algorithms.
Okay.
And so this is what I do. I take every idea that I have. I put it in a spreadsheet, and then I say, idea number 1, is this a forcing function? Meaning, if I execute on this idea, is it going to cause me to create something I was planning on doing anyways? So this new idea that I have is going to force me to do something I was already planning on doing. So yes or no. Number 2, is it going to be a time savings now or in the future? And if so, how much time am I going to save? And then number 3, will it be revenue producing? And do I have data that shows that that's the case? Have I validated my offer or my idea? If so, how much revenue? And then number 4, will it reduce expenses now or in the future? If so, how much? And so my criteria is that for me to proceed with any ideas, I need to be able to check at least 3 of the 4 boxes. And then if I can, then I'm looking at the highest leverage opportunities first. So all the ideas that I've checked 3 or 4 boxes, what's going to save the most time and generate the most money with the most amount of expense savings? And that's the one I'm going to do now.
I love that
and so what I'm doing is I'm trying to rig the game to win. I'm guaranteeing that even if the revenue isn't what I expected or the expense savings, I'm still creating something I plan on doing anyways, or I'm still saving myself time. Right? So I'm stacking the deck in my favor. So oftentimes we just look at it from revenue or just expense savings. And when that doesn't happen, then we're screwed, right? We're left being in this bad situation.
No, that's awesome. So this app, the Certainty app, is this something like, maybe this is a dumb question. Can you download this? Is this on the App Store?
Right now, it will be later this year. Right now, it's just available through browser.
Okay.
But anybody can go to it. What's the website?
It is, believe it or not, I got this domain, CertaintyApp.com.
Oh, wow.
And
I was shocked when I got this.
Does it cost? Can they only do it with working through you? Like, how does that part work?
Yeah, good question. So you don't have to work with our CPA firm or any of our other businesses. You can just utilize the app on its own.
Okay.
There is. So yeah, you can purchase the app and use it independent of working with us. But I actually use my 4 lens process to manufacture or create the scenario where I could fund the app and justify it.
No, I love that 4 lens process. I think there's is that on your website as well? Like, can people use that when plugging in their ideas and get easy access to the checkboxes?
I have a digital products business called CertaintyApp, where I teach things like the 4 lenses and how to create your kind of unique wealth equation. So all of that stuff, it'll be in my upcoming book, but it's also available through CertaintyApp.
That's amazing. I was going to say, how many businesses do you have?
Well, I have 3 sort of really active operating companies: Nth Degree CPAs, CertaintyApp, CertaintyApp.
Okay.
And then I have some holding companies and things for privacy purposes, Wyoming holding companies, etc.
That's where you own like an island or, no.
That's where he owns that background that he has, that virtual background.
Yeah, I got a fancy virtual background. I have a couple years ago, I started taking equity in clients where they wanted me to be their CFO. So
that's awesome.
I'm involved in a bunch of businesses where, in addition to maybe them hiring our accounting firm for tax and accounting stuff, if they wanted me to basically be their CFO, then at some point it just made sense for me to take equity.
Gotcha.
So
that makes sense.
I'm an owner in many businesses, but in sort of the lens of being their CFO.
I think one of the pain points, like when I hear this, I just go, yeah, it's exactly what you should do. Like you should sit down methodically. Like we have said all the time, business is just math. You know what I mean? And if you execute it right, but there's this gut to business, right? There's this feeling to business. And a lot of the great entrepreneurs, right? They just have a good sense. They're great at feeling the right way to go. I feel like the big pain point with this is like the time it takes to analyze everything, especially for the people who are not methodical and being able to write.
The time it takes to get something wrong.
Yeah. So
There's
how do you
factor there?
Like, what's your experience there with the time?
Yeah. So I wish I knew exactly the person who said this quote, but it's this idea that every system is perfectly designed to create the outcome it's currently generating. So if you are constantly on this roller coaster of ups and downs, and I can tell you when I look at people's cash flow, it's all over the place. The thing that's actually systematically going up over time is risk, that they've taken on so much risk to grow their cash flow that's why they have these big swings, these big
so
ups and downs.
Yeah, it's so true.
So to me, it's about adding some guardrails, basically. So once I put in the upfront lift to define my priorities, my wealth algorithm, which takes as quickly as 10 to 15 minutes, or it could take a few hours. Once you have that, it makes everything else easier. Because when someone says, "Hey, should we hire someone?" I go, "Okay, well, what's my number one priority right now?" And so it makes each of these preference-based decisions so much easier because I've already done the upfront work. The other thing I'll say is that, and this was something it took me a long time to realize, which is conventional finance is about maximizing. Maximizing is have the most. So if you're a publicly traded company, you have to maximize shareholder value. And so for a long time, I kept trying to give people these tools that I learned from working in big finance. And here's all these KPIs and budgets and so on and so forth. And then they'd never use it. And my default would be to assume I just didn't explain it very well. And then finally, I realized that the whole construct is wrong. We can't maximize, we have to optimize. And so optimize, what's the most efficient path forward to the thing that I want? Maximize is, let me fund every single priority. Let me get this algorithm perfect. I have to get everything in. I have to get all the dates, so on and so forth. But actually, we need to optimize. You actually just need to know what your number one priority is. And so many times people get caught up and I got to get them all down, the exact dollar amounts, the exact timelines. It's like, no, fastest path forward. And we just need to have the number one priority down. And until we vote with our money, we don't actually know what our number one priority is.
You said until we vote with our money?
Yeah, until we vote with our money.
Yep, no, makes perfect sense. Gary Keller wrote a book called The One Thing or whatever that is similar in concept there. It's like, what is the one thing that's going to actually move your business forward that you should actually focus on? That's really good.
I had someone a couple of years ago when we went through this whole exercise of what are your priorities and getting them in order. And then we did the optimization. Here's how much we can save you in tax and we can re-engineer cash flow, so on and so forth. And the outcome was we can fund your number one priority right now. And so what they said, their number one priority was they wanted to pay off this farm that they owned. And they told us their number 6 priority was they wanted to move to California. And so when we showed them, hey, you could pay off the farm right now, that voting with their money where they had to execute on that caused them to go, actually, I just want to move to California. And so, awesome. We spend so much time chasing our tail, trying to get everything perfect and maximize and get in the right order. You don't know until you're in the moment where you can actually fund.
Yeah,
that's so true.
Now, you want to know what someone really cares about. Look at their money and look at their time. Wherever they spend their money and their time, that's truly what's important to them.
100%.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, we got to ask you, because especially I'm so curious for someone like yourself who's very methodical, very well thought out in how you're running things. When you look at your life and your success, you own 3 businesses, you have equity in a ton of other ones, obviously successful. What are the routines that you have implemented in your life that have driven success for you?
Yeah, the number one thing is something I learned from my coach 4 or 5 years ago, which is this idea: play your game. Can I do this with one of you guys? Do we have enough time where I can do a couple minute exercise?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Producer Ariel saying yes, please.
Oh yeah, please
play a
do.
game. Put him on the
Who
spot.
wants to volunteer? Who wants to volunteer?
I'll
for
do
this?
Luke.
Oh, he goes, I'll do Luke.
No, I said do Luke.
Okay, yeah, I've been voluntold. All right.
Okay. What was your favorite sport or hobby growing up as a kid?
Music was my favorite hobby.
Okay. What instrument did you play?
Guitar and piano.
Okay. And what was it about music that you liked?
Love the emotion that music can tap into when people are unreachable. Music can still reach you. So I love the emotion it taps into in people.
And what was your style when it came to playing? How would you describe it?
I would describe it growing up probably Christian rock with a little bit of country flair because I grew up in the country.
Country flair. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
A little bit of hey y'all.
And what was your style? What was your style in terms of like practicing?
So for a period there from like 13 years old to probably 17, 18, 4 or 5 hours a day.
Okay.
4 or 5 hours a day?
Yeah. I was homeschooled.
Wow.
So
no wonder you're so good.
So now when you think about your style in business and as an entrepreneur, how would you say that it's similar or different in terms of what you like about business versus what you liked about music?
Yeah, it's similar in the sense of I like, because I'm in sales and marketing, I do a lot of things like this, podcasting, speaking on stage, webinars, that type of stuff. I love the influence that it gives from a human emotion standpoint and from an inspiration standpoint. So it's very similar. Music inspires people. Business can also inspire people, and motivation can inspire people, right? So that's very similar. Thinking about like different.
So would you say that your most, your highest enjoyment in business is when you're, feel like you're influencing others and providing like compelling content?
Absolutely. I would say when I am inspiring others to live a life of freedom. That's our vision statement for anybody wondering.
Yeah. So, I've done this exercise countless times as part of my interview process as well, when I try and get to the essence of someone. And the interesting thing is that more often than not, people's default style in business, when they're the most content and the most successful, is when they're most in alignment with how they were in their favorite sport or hobby.
That's amazing.
I'm sitting there listening to it, and I'm thinking, okay, I was kind of going along with you in my mind because I also was into music as a kid. And then when you asked how does it align with business, I'm like, oh my gosh, when I did instruments, I would jump around to different instruments all the time. I did it more for the creativity factor and being able to like create something new. I was always on to one thing. I never practiced 4 hours a day. I would just play whenever I kind of enjoyed it. I'm like, oh my gosh,
this is crazy. It is because I am obsessive when it comes to business, and will do it.
And I will jump around to the next shiny thing very quickly.
Right. Yeah, so I've done this countless times, and almost universally, when folks, sort of the light bulb moment goes off, where it's like, yeah, my default style, there's a lot of tendency overlap to how I was in my favorite sport or hobby and how I am in business. And so I'm sort of the personality type that I want to play to my strengths rather than trying to eliminate or spend a lot of time trying to eliminate my weaknesses. Doesn't mean I don't try and work on my weaknesses. Like, I'd rather play to my strengths than otherwise. And so, in terms of my routine, a lot of it is continual reflection about, am I actually playing my game? Because when I'm not, it's a recipe for making some really bad decisions, being pretty unhappy, getting further away from what I actually want. And but there's also a point. So my favorite sport was basketball. I always wanted to be shooting guard, but I was a tall kid. So I ended up being put under the hoop. But I always wanted to take the last shot, have the ball in my hand. And that's still my personality now. Like, I'm willing to take the shot, but sometimes you got to pass the ball. And so the downside is sometimes I'm just not passing. I'm taking too many shots. So it's sort of the practice of, I need to play my game, but also at the same point be aware of how sometimes the tendency is too pervasive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's the main thing. Play your game.
Man, that is so good. That might be one of the best routines that we've heard on the show.
That's a fantastic exercise.
I feel like that was worth the whole episode, just getting that light bulb for myself. I also think about...
You're enlightened?
Yeah, I'm enlightened. I also think about like the downside now, and I go, yeah. Sometimes you can't inspire people out of a bad idea, a bad concept. It's like, you're not going to motivate us through something awesome. That's not working. You got to change. So that's a downside too. Like what your natural thing is, what your natural tendency definitely has a downside. Man, That's so good.
Yep. Thank you so much for being here, Dan. Before we close out, let people know how they can connect with you, find out about your app. I know you've got a podcast that you do yourself. Maybe plug that if you want.
Yeah. Podcast is called Rigging the Game. And I talk about stuff like this, like unconventional approaches or just ways in which I do the opposite of what other folks might do. So Rigging the Game is a good spot to go to. CertaintyApp would be another place.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the episode. And thank you all so much for listening. To dive deeper into this episode, you get those links that we mentioned there. You can go to staypaidpodcast.com. And if you're interested in supporting the show, there's only 2 ways we ask you to do that. The first way is to head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review along with a comment about this episode. And the second way is to tell a friend. If you want to get hold of me or Luke, you can email us at podcast@ReminderMedia.com. And of course, you can follow us on Instagram. We're at Stay Paid Podcast. For this episode of Stay Paid, I'm Joshua Stike.
Guys, and I'm Luke Acree. And your action item for this, I really should tell you, do that exercise. That exercise was unbelievable. But your action item is really to think about your priority. And are you going for more or are you going closer to what you want? And I think that's just so powerful as a commandment, because that was on my mind this morning when I was talking about business. And it was the reason why it stuck out to me. And I want you to do it as an action item is because it's defining. It's like defining in what you're about to implement and what you're about to do. Is it really to go and get more, or are you actually getting closer to what you want to achieve in your life? And so in order to do that, you got to know what you want to get closer to. You got to know what you're actually going after. Remember this, the difference between a top producer and a mediocre producer in every single business is top producers take action. Take action on that today.